Welcome to Global View. Today we have the privilege of hosting a newly elected member of the Congress, Randy Fine. Congressman Fine is a Republican lawmaker from Florida, now serving in the United States House of Representatives after a high-profile campaign aligned with the America First agenda. Previously a state representative in the Florida House, Congressman Fine gained national attention for his unapologetic stance on conservative values, especially in education, parental rights, anti-war policies, and unwavering support for Israel. A successful businessman before entering politics, Congressman Fine brings a sharp, result-driven approach to Washington. He's known for his outspoken nature, strong alignment with President Donald Trump, and his effort to combat anti-Semitism and protect traditional American values. As one of the few Jewish Republicans in Congress, Fine also represents a powerful voice in the conversation around US-Israel relations, religious freedom, and cultural integrity. Thank you so much for joining Global View.
Thanks for having me. And if I ever can't make it to a speech, I'm going to ask them to send you because that was a great introduction. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, you have an incredible career. Before and ahead. I followed your work in Florida, soon to be our new adoptive state. We're moving there. So, and I was very impacted by your leading voice in anti-wokeism in the schools. And this is very important for saving culture in America. How do you think you will bring this fight at federal level?
Well, I'm going to do what I did in Florida. I didn't know what I was doing when I got elected to the Florida legislature. Being a politician was never a goal of mine as an adult. And I just put my head down. I said what I thought, and I did what I thought was right. You know, I don't really understand why people want to be elected. You don't get paid that much money. You're away from your family all the time. And a lot of people are really mean to you. So I realized early on, if I couldn't say what I thought and do what I thought was right, then why do the job? And so I attacked it the same way I did my business career. I put my head down and I got to work. It makes you a lot of enemies along the way, but what it does, it gets you 43 bills passed in 8 years. And so I plan to do it the same way in Congress.
Great. So it's a great point, Congressman, about having to fight, especially in this political climate. You saw the fight firsthand in Florida politics. Do you envision the fight to be more difficult in Washington, or is it going to be a similar fight in order to enact some of these proposals that you probably have in mind?
Well, I think it'll be harder in a couple of ways. Number one, you're dealing with a lot more people. I think part of what makes Congress unwieldy is the size. In the Florida House, there's 120 people. In Congress, there's 435. It's 3.5 times as big. That's a whole lot more egos and personalities that you have to deal with. And so that'll be an adjustment. And the second thing is I think everything is like higher profile. You know, the left is madder and they have more allies. And in Florida, we kind of have an overwhelming Republican majority at this point. So it's easier to get things done. Up there, part of the reason they were so excited to get me there is the margin is so tight. President Trump doesn't have the reinforcements that he needs. So I think because of the tightness of the margin and the number of people, it could be different. But look, I'm going to try to figure it out. And I'm going to do the best I can. I'm there to put points on the board. I'm not there to go to cocktail parties.
You know, just following up on that very slim margin that the Republicans have in Congress that you just discussed, how did it feel? Can you let our audience know how it felt, first, when President Trump endorsed you, and secondly, when he basically highlighted how thin the margin of error was, and you being squarely in the crosshairs of that, whether you won or lost, could have tilted the balance of power for the next to the probably much longer years. So how did that feel as a candidate?
Well, it was incredibly special. Look, I believe that God saved President Trump's life in Butler, Pennsylvania, so that he could save the world. If you didn't believe in God before that day, I don't know how you can't now. I mean, had his head been a quarter of an inch different than what it was, can you imagine what our country's situation would be like right now? And so the fact that someone who I believe is literally doing God's work thought that I could help him achieve that goal is the most profound achievement I could ever reach. And President Trump actually endorsed me before I filed to run. He endorsed me on the Saturday before Thanksgiving. And then I said, okay, this is real. I actually filed to run the following Tuesday. I had only been in the state Senate for 2 weeks. What was crazy is when I got elected to the state Senate, and by the way, with President Trump's help, I was super excited because I said, I have a 4-year term. I'm not going to be on the ballot for 4 years. Well, now, thanks to this, I'm going to be on the ballot 4 times in 2 years. But it was incredibly profound. And listen, to have the president of the United States take time from his schedule, saving the world, to do a tele-rally in front of tens of thousands of people and to say the incredibly nice and kind things that he did, that just doesn't happen to simple boys from Kentucky. And so, which is where I grew up. And so, this has been an amazing career experience for me. And all I want to do is help. I'm retired. I had a great business career and I was very lucky to have that, but I haven't really worked for a living in almost 11 years. This is all like high intensity volunteer service for me, like it is President Trump. I think that's part of why he likes me. I don't need this. He certainly doesn't need this. Elon Musk doesn't need this. We're people who do this because we want America to be better, to be greater. And I think so many of these other people out there don't share the same view. So it's the honor of a lifetime to be going to help him get his agenda done. And that's my number one priority. You got to make the team captain successful. He's the team captain, and that's going to be my focus for the next 2 years.
Absolutely. We're delighted to have you as representing us in Congress. So we can totally see why Donald Trump endorsed you. Absolutely common sense, result-oriented, driven by the common sense and good reasons to make a change, because you might not need it, but America needs it. So going back to Florida, Florida is definitely the example to me of one of the most healthy states in the United States. Health, we didn't bend to the dictatorship of COVID vaccine. So many good things have been happening over the last 4 years in Florida. So this is a very good trend to lead in the United States. Now, as a legislator from Florida, stepping onto national stage, how do you think to bring this fight there? And do you think it's realistic that the United States, as messed up as it is now in states like California or New York or Washington, D.C., can become Florida? Can we make the United States Florida?
Well, what I want to do is I want to tell my colleagues the Florida miracle. Mm-hmm. So Florida is the best run state in the country, not because of any one person. It's because we have had consistent conservative governance for almost 30 years through multiple governors, through hundreds of state legislators. When we took the majority in the Florida House, it was 61 to 59. That's kind of like 220 to 215. Today, it's 87 to 33. Why? Because year after year after year, we showed that we could govern. Everything wasn't a grand slam. There were lots of singles. There were lots of doubles. There were lots of triples. And there were home runs and grand slams too. But we showed the people of Florida that when you put us in charge, we moved the ball down the field. And so it went from 61-59 to 65-55 to 70 to 50. And we've built over 25 years an incredible supermajority. We can do the same thing in Washington. That's how we take a 5-vote majority, make it a 15, a 25, a 35, and basically a permanent majority, because policies work. Theirs don't. We just have to have the discipline to get them done and not get distracted with silly fights and egos. And I don't intend to be the cause of any of those problems. I'm going to be trying to talk to people about how we solve for them.
What do you think some of those concrete policies were that really created this massive gap from how it started in Florida to now? Basically, Florida historically had been a purple state throughout my entire my life, I should say. But now it's completely red. I mean, I couldn't imagine Florida in at least the next 2 elections going blue for any reason whatsoever. So what were the concrete policies or regulation cuts or issues that you identified that were the secret sauce to seeing that majority expand the way you described it?
Well, there's a lot of them, but I will talk about the 2 things that allowed Ron DeSantis to win in 2018 in a super, super close election, which, by the way, could change the rest of the country, or certainly places like New York and others if they were the same. When DeSantis won by a super narrow margin in 2018, he won for two reasons. Number one, Black single mothers who had gotten school choice and vouchers to send their kids to go to the schools that were right for them. That got them away from the orthodoxy of the Democratic Party, which said, we don't care if your kid goes to a failing school as long as the teachers union is happy. Well, we don't have national school choice, and that's something we should fix. And let's get those folks on our side. And then the second thing in 2018, and I was a part of it with Governor DeSantis before we had our sort of now infamous falling out, but was explaining to Jewish Floridians that our party was better than theirs. And DeSantis got a record-setting percentage of the Jewish vote, which was mostly because of his record, partly because of me. Those two groups is what set us on the path that we've been on for the last 6 years. And then just the policies about freedom and taxes and getting rid of the insanity that is in the left. Look, I was privileged. I ran the bill to ban mutilating surgeries and sterilizing drugs on children. And the left said it didn't happen, it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But if it does happen, it's good. That was my favorite part. I was like, well, if it doesn't happen, why do you care if I run this bill? But I found out about a doctor in South Florida who went by the trade name Dr. Titus Deletus, who was advertising on TikTok to teenage girls that if they just cut their body parts off, all their problems would go away. And I said, well, great. If this is a good idea, why don't you come tell us in Tallahassee? Instead of talking to teenage girls on TikTok, why don't you come talk to adults and legislators and explain to us why this is a good idea? So I invited her to testify. I was the chairman of the healthcare committee. You think she came? Nope. And I said, well, if you're only willing to talk to 12-year-olds and not 52-year-olds, it's probably not a good idea. And so we banned it. So we have gotten rid of all the stupid stuff that you can see other states doing. And as a result, look at how our state is booming. I mean, we really do need to make America Florida. And if we do that, so many of our problems will go away.
Absolutely. And foreign policy is a big part of Donald Trump impact in the world. He's approaching it not with the ideological point of view that is often masking other interests, but is doing it as a deal maker. So from the mineral deal in Ukraine to the development of Gaza Strip, what is your position, how you see developing the conflict Israel-Gaza?
Well, this is why I endorsed President Trump when he ran for re-election, which is not an easy thing to do. When the governor of your state's running and he's in control of the budget and your bills, and he's kind of a threatening sort of guy, to go against him took a lot. But I did it because my dad called me on October 8th, right after the attack, and said, Randy, and my father was not a huge fan of Donald Trump at the time. He didn't like kind of the way he talked. He didn't like mean tweets. But my dad called me on October 8th and he said, Randy, it's got to be President Trump. I said, why? He said, because these things wouldn't have happened if he was in charge.
True.
The world needs someone strong, someone they're afraid of, someone who's willing to get a little bit crazy. There's value in someone who's willing to make people worried. No one was afraid of Joe Biden, except maybe the people who had to clean up his messes. You know, I mean, no one was afraid of him, but Donald Trump, the world is afraid of, and that's good because the world needs strong leadership. And so I'm thrilled with what he's doing. Look, Joe Biden couldn't get any of the hostages out for a year and a half. And then boom, Trump gets in and they start coming out. He's standing with Israel. He's trying to end the war in Ukraine. He's telling China, we're not going to put up with this stuff. The world needs a strong America, and he's giving us that. And that's a big part of the reason why I'm so glad he's our president.
Diplomacy is obviously part of national security. Having the right team and a successful businessman who knows how to negotiate, of course, impacts U.S. national security. On the other hand, trade policy also impacts national security considerations. Of course, over the last 48 hours, the big topic of the days has been tariffs and economic policy and how that will potentially rebalance global trade and impact the domestic economy. What's your thought process on the tariff policy of the Trump administration vis-a-vis free trade or unfair trade, as President Trump calls it?
So I used to teach economics, one of the many things I did in my career. And I will tell you that the biggest mistake that modern economists have made, and I was one of them, is that there's something in economics called an externality. It's when there's something that's not captured by markets that when you price into it changes the ultimate outcome. People will talk about the externality of pollution or things like that. Well, there's something called a national security externality. And I'll give you a great example. We could not hold China accountable for what they did to us, whether intentionally or not.
Yeah.
They did it to us. We could not hold China responsible for COVID because you can't hold a country responsible that's making the prescription drugs that your people need to live. You can't hold a country accountable that's making the medical equipment that you need for your society to function. And so President Trump has said, look, there are certain things that have to be made in America. Look, where plastic action figures get made or underwear and socks, who cares from a national security perspective? But steel and cars and microchips and medicine, we can't afford to get those from people we may be fighting with. Now, I'm not worried about them coming from Israel or Germany or France, but I am worried if they come from a place like Iran or China or Russia. So that's the first reason I support them. The second reason I support them is tariffs were apparently a really good idea when other countries are doing them to us, then they're fine. But when we say, you know what, the rules are going to be the same, then they're terrible. So apparently American tariffs are bad, but everybody else doing tariffs are good. See, the reason they do that is America wins every time if the field is fair, if the rules are the same. And the president's saying he's not starting the trade war. They've been doing the trade war for decades. We just weren't fighting back. And he is saying no more. The rules are going to be the same. And then the third thing, and I don't think these tariffs last long term, but let's assume they did. They will bring in a ton of money. And if you could take that money and offset it with cutting income taxes, a tariff is just a sales tax on foreign goods. And what would you rather have? Income taxes or sales taxes on foreign goods if you bring in the same amount of money? If we could restructure our economy, say we're not going to have income taxes, we'll just put sales taxes on stuff not made in America, our economy would boom as a result of that. Although that's not where I think we end up. So I support it for all of these reasons. And people who step back and think about it and don't act with hysterics, they'll get to the same answer too. So I'm excited by what the president's doing.
Yeah, it's important people understand tariff is not about importing a Gucci bag and paying them double the price than in Italy. It's about important things like drugs that we are importing from China. There is no reason why we should give to an enemy the power of our drug market. But you know, you've made a point also very important on waste governmental money, cutting prices. So which would be the first federal agencies or programs you would target to cut, you know, the public spending?
Well, that's easy. And I think it's in process. It's the Department of Education.
Oh.
I mean, I will tell you, I made my mark in the Florida legislature on two things. Obviously, issues relating to Israel and anti-Semitism because of who I am. But the reason I ran for the legislature was education. And I will tell you, Washington did not help. Now, they gave us some money, and that's great. But the problem is there are 4,000 people who work for the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. 4,000. How many of those 4,000 do you think teach children? None. And the problem is when they send us all this money with all these rules and restrictions, we need thousands of employees at the state and local level in order to deal with all the strings from the federal government. You know how many of them teach children? None. So give us the money that you actually spend on the kids, cut all the overhead, use that to reduce the debt and the deficit. And I think you can do that over and over and over again. And when Elon Musk discovered there's all these government buildings where they're all empty and everybody's quote unquote working from home, there's a massive amount of fraud and abuse in the government. And the problem is you can't run a $2 trillion deficit forever. You have to do one of three things to get that deficit under control. One is cut waste, fraud, and abuse. Two is raise taxes so there's more revenue. Or three, cut programs that really matter. Well, which of these three things do you think we ought to do first? I understand the Democrats don't care about a deficit. They're fine with $50 million boxes of condoms and 300-year-old people getting Social Security. I'm not. And so I believe we should be hacking away. And I'm grateful for what the president and Elon Musk are doing to solve a lot of these problems. There is so much waste out there, and we ought to get rid of all of it.
You mentioned three points to help ramp up an economy. I think this administration is doing one and three, and they're not raising taxes. In fact, what they want to do is they want a tax deal to lower taxes, especially for middle income Americans and the middle class in general. Where do you stand on, first of all, regarding these negotiations on now tax cuts that are happening simultaneously with this new tariff policy? Do you think in tandem this will help grow the economy, or will there be some road bumps ahead?
Well, I think there's definitely going to be road bumps. I mean, we see it with the tariffs. Look, change is not easy. If you can make change without there being road bumps, then you're really not changing anything. And so the fact that there is this uncertainty proves that he's actually doing something. People generally don't like the world to be different than it was yesterday. That's why we're in the mess that we're in. No one's ever willing to cut. Everybody just goes along to get along. We talk about the deep state, and the deep state's real. But you know what a lot of it is? It's not always the deep state's out to get us. A lot of it is no one wants to change. People are generally like inertia. And so it's not like oftentimes a strategy. It's just like, oh, I don't want to have to do the work of changing. President Trump is doing the work of changing, and tax cuts are part of it. What we have to do is we have to be building a plan, and they're doing that, to get our budget in line. The number one, the most existential threat to the United States, by far, is not Russia, it's not China, and it's not Iran. The existential threat to the United States is our inability to live within our means. That's the existential threat. And part of the reason I agreed to do this is I know that in the lifetime of my children, the country will collapse if we don't solve for this problem. I'm not saying it'll happen next week, next month, or next year, but they're 13 and 16 years old. They're going to live for a long time, and we're not going to make it if we don't fix it. And I'm not willing to be a part of that. Cutting taxes in the right way is part of it. Cutting regulations is part of it. Cutting spending is a huge part of it. Making sure we have fair trade. These things all go together. And what we just need to do is support the president as he does it and not give in to the media fantasy of the day. Remember, they were saying I was going to lose. Randy's going to lose. I had a huge 14-point win. The left just wants to create hysterics to derail President Trump, and we can't let him do it.
They definitely master narrative, misinformation, and unfortunately, the corrupted fake news started colluding with our justice system. We have seen much lawfare targeting everyone around Trump until him directly. Now, we have a lot of pending issues, and to me, one of the most important one is accountability. I want to see the people who try to implemented lawfare against Trump advisors, Trump himself. I want to see them in jail. Do you think this is going to happen?
I don't know, but I've experienced it myself. Now, nowhere near the same scale as President Trump, but the left believes in legitimizing these things to try to stop you. We have to, I believe, number one, you push back. And one thing I disagree with is I believe you do it right back to them. The reason the left hated me in Florida is because I fought on their level. When they go low, I say you meet them there.
Because I go lower.
No, I don't have to go lower. You just meet them where they are.
Meet them their way.
The left attempts to use our morality to beat us into submission. They use emotional terrorism at times to do that. Part of the reason they hate me is it doesn't work with me. Name you want, I don't care. I just want to do the right thing. And so I believe you fight fire with fire. And I believe if you do these things to us, we should do them right back to you, because that's when it stops. I don't know if it's a national slogan, but in Florida, the Democrats have the slogan. They say, this is what democracy looks like. Only when they win. When they lose, it's lawsuits and protests. Then it's not democracy. Democracy is only when they win. because we allow them to do that. I say, no, you people are full of it. You lost. Barack Obama's the one who said elections have consequences. Deal with it. It's not that they have consequences when you win, but not when we win. We won. So deal with it. And I think we need to be unapologetic in how we do what we do. They hate me because I'm strong. My hashtag on social media is bombs away. They lose their mind. Oh, yeah, I don't care.
Ugh.
I don't care. I am here to fight because, frankly, these people hate America. They hate America. They hate what we stand for. They hate what we believe in. And if we don't fight them, we'll end up like Europe. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let that happen.
Well, as a European myself from Italy, I wish it will not become Europe.
Yeah,
Indeed,
and you
indeed.
left. You
Yeah.
left. You know, I mean,
you did.
I don't see a lot of Americans leaving to go to other places. People generally want to come here.
But I
And-
left
and-
because of them, but
Well, that's a good reason too. So, but you know, I mean, but people around the world want to come here.
That's right.
You don't see a lot of Americans wanting to become citizens of other places.
That's right.
You see a lot of people want to move here because we still are a place where you can go and you can change your life. And the policies that these lefties want will ruin all of that. And so we've got to fight them, and we need to not be afraid to do it. I'm not afraid. Again, that's the benefit of not needing this job, of not thinking of myself as a politician.
Mhm.
I worry about being judged when my time is done by 3 people, only 3. One of them is the man upstairs. And I'm pretty confident he'll judge me well. I mean, look, he made sure I won on Tuesday. So there's that. But the other 2 people I worry about judging me are my boys, my children, you know, who at the end of the day, 30 or 40 years ago, have to say, oh, my dad did a good job. They don't care if I lose an election. They only care if I'm doing the right thing. And that's, I think if most politicians worry, most of them have kids. I think if they worried about the judgment of their kids more than they worried about the judgment of the New York Times, they'd make a lot better decisions.
Very well said,
Very
Congressman. Congressman, one last question from me. It's about Israel and the United States relationship with Israel. I actually started my career in Israel in many ways. I used to be an advisor for an energy company that had discovered natural gas in Israel in early 2010 era. So I go back in that country a lot. I've been interviewed in many of the newspapers there. I know the country very well. And I'm a very firm believer in the U.S.-Israel strategic relationship, and not only strategically, but morally. And I think we share the same values. So as you're now entering Congress, how do you envision the U.S.-Israel relationship, and how can it be strengthened?
I think President Trump, as Bibi has said, has been Israel's greatest friend. And I think we need to do that. Look, the people who hate Israel hate America. It's the same people. And the reason why Israel is fighting a war against all these people is because they're closer and there's a lot fewer of them. But, you know, Muslim terror is like the Nazis. And I think about this a lot. What made the Holocaust unique was not genocide or ethnic cleansing. Unfortunately, there are many places around the world where people have said, hey, this group of people's not like me. Let's kill them all. And it's not okay. But what made the Holocaust different is the Nazis not only said, we want to kill everyone who's not like us, they then said, we want to go take over the whole world and kill everyone who's not like us. We're not just satisfied to kill them all here. We want to get to everywhere and wipe them all out. That's the only time in history that has happened until now with Muslim terror. They want to do it in Israel, and then they want to go to Europe, and then they want to come here. Israel is fighting the same fight we're going to have to fight. And by the way, we are fighting it. Look at our college campuses. I mean, we have to fight that fight too. And so Israel shares our values. You go to Israel, the people are just like us. Their values are the same. Their belief in the freedom of free speech, the fact that they argue, you know, the fundamental political values of Israel are almost identical to the United States. And except they speak Hebrew. They don't speak English, although most of them speak that too. You go to Tel Aviv, you could be in Miami. And so I believe it is essential for us to partner with them because they're the only ones in that part of the world who share those values. And they're fighting the fight that we'll have to fight if they don't win it. And so I'm not going to say I will be the most pro-Israel member in Congress because there could be others that are just as pro-Israel as me. But I will say this, there will be no one more pro-Israel than I am.
Thank you so much. And the very exciting time ahead in this administration with great voices like you in Congress, where people can follow your work.
Well, the easiest thing is probably to go to my Twitter, voterandyfine.com. I'm pretty entertaining, so I mean they won't be bored if they go there. I most of it's written by me, and I don't worry. I mean, right now you can find this toxic stew of anti-Semites and crazily Muslim terrorists if you read the comments. So I don't know that I would encourage people to read the comments. But my Twitter at voterandyfine, or Randy Fine on Facebook, although I don't think I've been able to change it from State Senator Randy Fine to Congressman Randy Fine yet. Or they can follow me on my website at voterandyfine.com and get their names on our mailing list. But you'll hear from me. I am many things. Quiet is not one of them.
Thank you so much. We hope to have you back on the show along the line.
Anytime.
Then. Thank
Anytime.
you. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Congressman.
Thanks, guys.